Para hadirin yang dihormati, majlis pada petang ini akan bermula sebentar sahaja lagi. Hadirin dipohon untuk menetapkan tetapan mod telefon bimbit ke mod senyap agar tidak mengganggu kelancaran majlis. Terima kasih. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the event will begin shortly. Kindly set your phone to silent mode throughout the event. Your cooperation is highly appreciated. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Selamat datang ke Majlis Pelancaran Buku, Undang-Undang, Prinsip dan Amalan di Dewan Rakyat. Welcome to the soft launch of law, principles and practice in the Dewan Rakyat, House of Representatives of Malaysia. Saya mohon izin untuk meneruskan program pada hari ini dalam bahasa Inggeris. Please allow me to continue in English. His Excellency Tan Sri Datuk Muhammad Arif bin Mat Yusuf, Speaker of the Dewan Rakyat, Honorable Datuk Rashid bin Hasnun and Honorable Mr. Nga Koming, Deputy Speaker of the Dewan Rakyat, Tan Sri Zahara Ibrahim, former Chief Judge, High Court of Malaya, authors and contributors, Honorable Members of Parliament, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. This book, initiated by the Speaker of the Dewan Rakyat, not only highlights the importance of parliamentary procedure and practices, it also documents the standards of good practices and universal guidelines on integrity and good public governance in Malaysia and within the Commonwealth. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin today's event with an opening speech by Mr. Girish Kamat, Country Head Thomson Reuters Malaysia. Please welcome.
YB Tan Sri Dato Muhammad Arif Muhammad bin Muhammad Yusuf, Speaker of Dewan Rakyat. YB Dato Rashid bin Hasnun, Deputy Speaker 1. YB Tuan Ang Koming, Deputy Speaker 2. Tan Sri Zahara Ibrahim, former Chief Judge, High Court Malaya. Authors and contributors, Honorable Members of Parliament, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon to all of you. And it gives me a great pleasure to welcome all of you here today to the launch of law, principle and practices in the Dewan Rakyat of Malaysia. It is an honor and privilege to have you here, including all of you who have joined virtually to celebrate this launch function. Special thanks to participants who have joined us all the way from Australia. Something about the book and its background. This book is the result of the dedication and hard work of team of 25 expert authors led by Tan Sri Arif, Dato Rosma Hamza and Professor Schatz Farooqi as a general editor. This team was supported by the Clerk of Dewan Rakyat, senior officers from Clerk's office, research officers and officers from the Speaker's office. We are very proud to be associated with one of the first publication covering Malaysian parliamentary proceeding. The authors are all eminent people in their respective fields in Malaysia. It's a long and impressive list. Allow me to name few aside Tan Sri Arif. Professor Dato Schatz Farooqi, Malaysia's acknowledged constitutional law expert. Dato Azhar Haroon, who is currently chairman of Election Commission. Dato Rosmi Hamza, former secretary of Dewan Rakyat. Dato Gurdal Singh, renowned senior advocate and academician. Professor Farid Sufyan Shoaib, Dean of Law Faculty, IIUM, Dato Ambiga Srinivasan, a well-known human rights advocate and activist. The list goes on. Due to limited time, I am not able to acknowledge all the other distinguished authors, but I humbly apologize for that. Parliament is one of the key state institutions in democratic system of governance, having a critical role to play in promoting democracy and good governance. In the parliamentary democracy, Parliament is indeed the vehicle to ensure executive accountability, transparency, and governmental good governance, as well as to provide effective oversight over the proper use of national coffers. In the last 6 decades as an independent nation, Malaysia has developed its own parliamentary procedures, processes, conventions, and practices. This important development calls for a reliable source of reference to guide parliamentary practices in Malaysia. This book aims to be a comprehensive reference for parliamentarians, parliamentary officers, civil servants, serious scholars and researchers, and the general reader who has a keen interest in parliamentary affairs. We at Thomson Reuters are always at the forefront in publishing quality products in legal domain and supporting legal literary endeavors to back the practice and development of local law to the fullest. In Malaysia, we have been proudly bought Sweet and Maxwell products to you since 1997. In last 2 decades, we have published more than 250 quality products. Some of them for the key practitioners includes Malaysian Civil Procedure, Bulletin League and Jacob's Malaysian Precedents of Pleadings, and the Federal Constitutional Commentary. In the current digital and social media age, Thomson Reuters Malaysia has endeavored to deliver our products not only in the print form, but also in electronic form. All our products and the services are available on our fully transactional website. We offer a leading online research platform, Westlaw Asia, and our proprietary e-book service, ProView. Before I end, I wish to record our sincere thanks to Tansri Arif and the rest of the team of authors and the parliamentary staff who have tirelessly worked to complete this voluminous book in a good time. I would also like to put my sincere thanks to my colleague, Rachel, Kevin, and the supporting TR team for the excellent editorial work. In conclusion, allow me to thank you in advance for your support of law principle and practice in DEWAN RAKYAT in Malaysia. The book will be available for purchase soon, and you can book your copy on our website, sweetandmaxwellasia.com.my. We are also pleased to inform you that this book will be available through our partners, Marsden Logbook, Joshua Art Gallery, Kunikonia, and MPH, and of course on our website. Thank you all of you again, and all good wishes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Girish Kamat. Next, I would like to invite the co-author of this book, Emeritus Professor Schatz Farooqi, Professor of Law, University of Malaya, to deliver his speech. Please welcome.
Yang Amat Berhormat Tan Sri Muhammad Arif Muhammad Yusuf and distinguished guests, Assalamualaikum Warahmatullah. May peace be upon you all. May I begin by pointing out that September 12th, 2020 will be the 61st anniversary of our Parliament. On April 24th, 1959, the then Federal Legislative Council met for the last time before being replaced by the Malayan Parliament. On August 19th, 1959, independent Malaya held her first general election. On September 12, 1959, the first post-independence Parliament was summoned to session by our young Dipertonagon. Now, as Parliament enters its 7th decade, the time is ripe for an examination of the constitutional role and for an evaluation of how far theory and reality converge or diverge. This pioneering book does exactly that. It is not just a commentary on parliamentary procedures. It gives an overview of the critical constitutional roles and functions of our supreme legislative institution. It provides a path for institutional reform and for enhancing institutional efficacy. In political theory, an elected and representative legislature is the central pillar of a democratic polity. In our system of parliamentary government, the legislature is supposed to perform a very large number of functions. Among them are the following: the legislative function, oversight of executive policy, control of national finance, constituency function, giving legitimacy to the government, giving voice to the electorate, control of emergency powers, electoral boundaries, Malay reserves, parliamentary privileges, and in the case of the Senate, it has the additional function of representing the 13 states and the federal territories. Regrettably, however, except for the constituency function, Parliament fails to perform the other functions satisfactorily. Reform of the law and practice of Parliament is therefore absolutely necessary. On a positive note, let me say that many of the reforms outlined in this book have been underway since Tan Sri Arif took office 2 years ago. Tan Sri provided much needed leadership to strengthen our legislative institution. The paths he blazed can show direction for years to come. I hope and pray that these reforms will continue in the years and decades ahead. All of us participating in this book launch wait for the era when our Parliament evolves from a purely formal to a truly functioning representative institution that is the grand inquest of the nation. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you, Emeritus Professor. Now, I would like to invite the next co-author, Professor Dr. Farid Sufyan Shuaib, Dean of Ahmad Ibrahim Kuliah of Laws, International Islamic University of Malaysia, to say a few words. Please welcome.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. His Excellency Tan Sri Datuk Muhammad Arif bin Muhammad Yusuf, distinguished guests, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. It is indeed an honor for me and my co-writer, who can't be here today, Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Isham Muhammad Kamal, to be given the opportunity to be involved in this important project, the writing of the first comprehensive work on law, principles and practice in DEWAN RAKYAT of Malaysia. Our thanks are certainly for Tan Sri Datuk Muhammad Arif Muhammad Yusuf, the Speaker of DEWAN RAKYAT, for the invitation and for the trust given to us to deliver a chapter entitled Parliament, Treaties and International Law. Tan Sri's zeal and commitment to reform the DEWAN RAKYAT so that the members could contribute meaningfully in the betterment of our country is certainly infectious. Infectious in a good way, taking into account the current pandemic situation. When the offer was given for us to write a chapter, we did not hesitate in taking up the opportunity. Prof. Emeritus Sheikh Farooqi have given the overview and the detailed introduction on the work. Let me read a little bit of what we have written, and I promise that I wouldn't bore you with the details. The traditional understanding on the role of Parliament over international treaties is one of reticence to the more dominant role of the executive in international affairs. William Blackstone, in his commentaries on the laws of England, wrote that it is the king's prerogative to make treaties, leagues, and alliances with foreign states and princes. However, nowadays, the Parliament is expected to play a larger role in our democracy, including in matters relating to international relations and treaties. For instance, the Parliament could contribute by actively monitoring and participating in international negotiation and scrutinizing relevant international instruments. Parliament should be an oversight authority in ensuring the compliance of the state to international treaties. We have given few suggestions in putting this idea into practice in our chapter. We will only mention one here, that is, by putting into law the requirement that a proposal to ratify a treaty should be tabled and debated in the Parliament prior to ratification, as done in England under the Constitutional Reform and Governance Act 2010. Again, we would like to thank Tan Sri Datuk Muhammad Arif bin Muhammad Yusuf, the Speaker of Dewan Rakyat, for the continuous effort in uplifting the role of Parliament in nation building and protecting the interests of the country, and in including us together in this journey. And we also hope the best for Tan Sri and the team in safeguarding the integrity and the stature of the Dewan Rakyat. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Next, may I invite Mr. David Elder, former clerk of the Australian House of Representatives, who wrote the foreword for the book, to say a few words. Please welcome.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speakers, distinguished guests, greetings from a very cold Canberra. I wish I could be there to meet you in KL, where I'm sure it's much warmer than it is here in Canberra at the moment. So it's really a tremendous honour when the Speaker invited me to make a few remarks about the launch of this very fine publication, Law, Principles and Practice in the Malaysian House of Representatives. The Speaker's to be particularly commended as the Editor-in-Chief for taking the initiative to see this publication come to fruition. I might say that I've also been down the path of editing a volume of Practice and Procedure. As the former clerk of the Australian House of Representatives, I was the editor of the very recently issued 7th edition of House of Representatives Practice. It's seen as the definitive volume of the practice of the Australian House of Representatives, and I'm sure over time this volume also will be seen as the definitive volume of Malaysian parliamentary practice and procedure. So the team led by the Speaker and the then Clerk of the House, Datuk Rosemary, are really to be commended for their efforts in producing this very first volume of Malaysian practice and procedure. As the Speaker notes in his introduction to the book, the Malaysian Parliament has evolved its own practices, rules and procedures in the 60 years of its existence, and it's entirely appropriate that those practices receive recognition. And this book is a documentation of that practice and procedure that is quite unique to Malaysia. I must admit, as an Australian, I was very, very pleased to see the number of references in the book to the Australian House of Representatives practice. And I'm sure that in times to come, as this book of Malaysian practice becomes well known, aficionados of parliamentary practice and procedure such as myself will be referring very frequently to the Malaysian practice as one that we should be considering and adopting. I was very pleased recently to have been engaged by the United Nations Development Programme as an international consultant to work with the Malaysian Parliament on the development of its practices and procedures and processes. So I've been very fortunate to see the progress that the Malaysian Parliament has made recently. A committee system has been implemented and has been consolidated. Other changes have also been implemented. These changes provide, I think, a very strong basis for Parliament to perform its very important role of greater accountability and scrutiny of government. So to conclude, as important as the efforts of this book are to document the current practice of the Malaysian House have been, it also seeks to explain how Malaysian Parliament has progressed in recent months. It seeks to explain how change can be achieved and anticipate areas where the Parliament can develop in the future. In that way, it not only marks an important achievement in the development of the Malaysian Parliament, it also points the way forward. So I commend all of those who have been involved in the production of this very fine publication, and I must say I look forward to receiving a copy of it in due course in the mail here in Australia. So thank you very much for the invitation to be involved.
Thank you, Mr. David Elder. Now, please welcome Tan Sri Zahara Ibrahim, who is also the writer of the foreword for this book, to say a few words.
Thank you. Yang Berhormat Tan Sri Speaker, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I will not touch on the book. I've written a foreword reluctantly because I told Tan Sri Arif that after retirement my brain has become petrified. But anyway, what I seek to do now, with your kind indulgence, is to use the time, the short time that I have, to take a short trip down memory lane. I first entered this very building in 1981. Some people here may not have been born yet. And for 20 years, I've been in and out of this building, and this became my second office actually. And I have gained valuable experience witnessing at close quarters, or at, having front seat, so to speak, of the standing orders in action. Let me share several of the instances that I have had occasion to be part of or to witness. In 1985, the government decided to have a select committee for the Dangerous Drug Special Preventive Measures Bill. I didn't go with the rest of with the select committee all over the country to listen to views from the various quarters of the public, but I had the boring, I must say, but very illuminating experience of sitting with the select committee to help prepare the report and to prepare the amendment to the bill. And this is where what was then the practice. In Parliament at that time, if you want to have something tabled, you must have 500 copies of the document. Is it still the practice now? I don't know. At that time, there was no way to do it. So I had my typist and I cyclo-style 500 copies of the amendment to the bill, and I carried the 500 copies in my car, parked in front there, and carried the 500 copies up, well, in 3 batches, up the steps there, the front steps, and up the other steps down to the office at this corner here, and presented the copies to the Parliament staff. So, and Puan Sri Hakimah mentioned that her son, who was an intern here, didn't know what cyclo-style copies are. Those were what we had at that time, cyclo-style copies. The next year, in 1986, I was called to the PD's office, the Parliamentary Draftsman office, and given a bunch of papers and said, these are the proposed amendments to the standing orders which came from the Speaker's office. Your job is to put them into the formal, proper amendment bill-like form, and to prepare the cabinet paper, take them to cabinet, and get cabinet approval for that. And I was what is the equivalent now of L48. So I had nothing except the amendments, the bare amendments. I didn't know why the amendments, what were the reasons for the amendments. But I was told, just wing it and do whatever you can. So I drafted cabinet paper, and I discovered that I didn't know how to draft a cabinet paper. I asked everyone around in chambers. No one had ever prepared a cabinet paper. So I had to go to Bahagian Cabinet to seek assistance, to ask them how to prepare a cabinet paper. Finally did a cabinet paper. The only amendment which I can remember, which was proposed, is to increase the quorum. 26 was supposed to be increased to 45. I was wondering why 45. I didn't know head or tail of what was going on, so I did some research and found out that in 1959, the members of parliament stood at 104, so 26 was 1/4. In 1986, because of the amendment in February 1986, the number of members of parliament was then 180, so 45 was 1/4 of 180. So that was what I put in the cabinet paper. And there I was outside the cabinet room, waited and waited and waited. No one came out to tell me whether the paper was approved or not. Finally, at 12 o'clock, Tan Sri Dato at that time, Kamal Zaman, the secretary to Bahagian Cabinet, stepped out and said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm still waiting to find out what happened to the cabinet paper." "Oh, all rejected." So the whole paper was rejected. There were quite a lot of amendments, and that's the end of that particular exercise. But in 1998, I managed to do something else for the standing orders. At that time, if you recall, in Standing Order 51B, there was a requirement for all bills to have marginal note. And we in chambers, in drafting particularly, found it quite difficult because we sent the soft copy to the government printers, and when the blue copy came out, it is all, the marginal note get all mixed up with the body of the text. And so we had a tough time editing it. So finally we decided that by that time MLJ and LBS had come up with their acts of parliament with, instead of marginal note, they had shoulder notes. So we decided that perhaps it's time to have shoulder note. And at the same time, we also noticed that in various jurisdictions, Kenya, for example, the Bahamas, they no longer had the enacting clause that we had. We used to have this enacting clause. I still remember it. Be it enacted by the Duli Yang Maha Mulia Sri Paduka Baginda Yang di-Pertuan Agong with the advice and consent of the Dewan Negara and Dewan Rakyat in Parliament assembled and by the authority of the same as follows. That was the long enacting clause. So we decided that that's too long. Let's just, Yang di-Pertuan Agong, Dewan Negara, Dewan Rakyat, they are all part of Parliament, the constituents of Parliament. So we decided that perhaps we should propose that the enacting clause be simplified to just be it enacted by the Parliament of Malaysia as follows. Fortunately, the minister in the Prime Minister's Department at that time, Dato' Abang Abu Bakar, was quite amenable to the idea. So we managed to do that. So if you look at your Standing Order 51B now, it says either in the margin or above the clause, and your article Standing Order 95 now has been changed so that the enacting clause is no longer that lengthy, what is common in England, but no longer common to Malaysia. So that is to share how my contribution or my participation or my front seat experience of being in Parliament. There were other, which as I told Tan Sri Arif, if I want to tell you what I had gone through and experienced in Parliament, we will be here until nightfall. So thank you, Tan Sri Arif, for inviting me to write a foreword. And I wish that the book would be, and I am sure the book would be a very useful addition to our understanding of how Parliament works, and to a very useful resource for not just students, but also to everyone who is interested to know how Parliament functions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Next, I would like to invite Datuk Rosmi binti Hamzah, former Secretary of the Dewan Rakyat, who is also the co-author of this book, to deliver her speech. Please welcome.
Thank you, Madam MC. I'm very worried to get a mic. I missed the mic. Tan Sri. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. And a very good afternoon. I have to make some acknowledgement because I see very, very familiar faces. I feel guilty if I don't acknowledge. Yang Berhormat Tan Sri Datuk Muhammad Arif Mat Yusuf, the Speaker of Dewan Rakyat, who is also the General Editor cum co-author of our much prized law principles and practice in Dewan Rakyat. I also see Yang Berbahagia Puan Sri Hakimah, Yang Berhormat Datuk Rashid bin Hasnun, Deputy Speaker of Dewan Rakyat, Yang Berhormat Tuan Nga Koming, Deputy Speaker. Both of them I work very closely with. Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Zahra Ibrahim, the former Chief Judge in High Court of Malaya, whom I knew and we worked together when Tun Zahir was the Speaker. I learned a lot from Tan Sri Zahra and also from Tun. And we have also with us Yang Berhormat Honourable Tuan Liu Chin Tong, MP for Kluang, who's also in the editorial committee member. We have YB Liu Vikiong, the former minister who's in charge of Parliament. We'll see a lot of MPs. Ahli-ahli yang berhormat, I see YB Wong Chen, YB Hassan Bahrom, YB Hassanuddin, YB Said Ibrahim, YB Natra, YB Nur Amin. I think I didn't miss any of the rest. Ahli-ahli yang berhormat, very honoured YB can make it here today. Mr. Girish Kamat, just know you today, country head Thomson Reuters Malaysia. Without you, our book could not be out. Emeritus Professor Schatz Salim Farooqi, Professor of Law, University of Malaya, co-author, who has been a friend of mine also now. Professor Dr. Farid Sufyan Shuib, the Dean of Ahmad Ibrahim Kuliah of Laws, International Islamic University of Malaysia, who is also the co-author. Mr. David Elder, my good friend, I do not know whether you're still there via Zoom, who is the former clerk, who is also my counterpart and also a colleague. We have worked closely, and we are also former clerk and members of the Society of the Clerks at the Table in the Commonwealth, so-called SOCET. And I see also we have here Datuk Khamis Samin, the Chief Administrator of Parliament, Tuan Nizam Maidin, the Secretary of Dewan Rakyat. Cik Ridwan was here just now from Dewan Negara. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As I say, I'm worried to get the mic. Tan Sri, the hard masa, Tan Sri. As a former Secretary of Dewan Rakyat or the House of Representatives, serving from December 2007 till 21st February 2020, nearly 12 years, and I joined Parliament 2001. I am deeply honoured to be given this opportunity, Tan Sri, as a co-author and also to address this historical moment in the Malaysian Parliament, or in Malay, Lipatan Sejarah, for the virtual book launch of our very own book, Law, Principles and Practice in Dewan Rakyat, House of Representatives of Malaysia, which is now the very pride of our Malaysian Parliament. We are so proud, Tan Sri. I wish to express my heartfelt appreciation and highest appreciation, congratulations to Yang Berhormat Tan Sri Muhammad Arif bin Mat Yusuf, my former boss, Speaker of Dewan Rakyat, who had initially mooted the idea when he took the helm as Speaker in 2018, and thus worked tirelessly. Tak penat orang kata, worked tirelessly with a team in Parliament, Tan Sri, and also his comrades all lined up here outside the precincts of Parliament towards producing a book which we say either similar to Eskin May, Parliamentary Practice of the British Parliament, or at par with others we have been using, Guide to Procedures, House of Representatives Australia, my counterpart, David Elder, Parliamentary Practice in New Zealand, House of Commons Procedure and Practice of Canada, Practice and Procedure of Parliament, Lok Sabha, India, and the parliamentary practices of other mature democracies that we have been using as references in the course of running Parliament and Dewan Rakyat in particular. From the initial idea, now it has been realized with the collective effort from a large pool of subject matter experts. Congratulations, Sansri. You managed to get all the subject matter experts together. That is something we should really, really appreciate. This initiative must be lauded as it offers a valuable platform as reference. Dulu we do not have that previously. As reference, providing a wealth of guides. Dear friends, we have guides, procedures, processes, conventions. I still remember Tan Sri, illustrations, Tan Sri kata put in illustrations, actual proceedings. Since being the secretary, and I also have my office at the back there, we take real proceedings samples. It is not plucked from the air, but it is through actual proceedings and the likes for members of parliament, parliamentary officers, civil servants, civil societies, media, academia, and general masses to enrich one's horizon of knowledge with our own homegrown parliamentary practices developed through the years. This is something very, very near to our heart, and we managed to do it. Tan Sri, it's quite unbelievable. We have, but we have not documented it. It has been tough, Tan Sri, I know, and the whole team, no doubt, with limited time, with limited resources, Tan Sri. Remember, we had limited resources too. But nevertheless, Yang Berhormat Tan Sri Muhammad Arif and the Malaysian Parliament, come 2020, we made it. Congratulations, Tan Sri Muhammad Arif and the whole parties involved. Ladies and gentlemen, the cost of producing this book, Datuk Rosmi, yours truly, being the former secretary, or commonly known in the Commonwealth as the clerk of the house. Clerk, sometimes people ingat kerani je, but it's very high ranking. Is being assisted by very able team from Pengurusan Dewan Rakyat, Office of the Clerk, comprising of senior officers. I have my officers at the back there. Ami Sharizan, Ami kan? Ami Sharizan, Cik Shaharzad Yusuf, Encik Wan Ahmad Shazwan, now no more here, Encik Norzul Helmizul, and Muhammad Amir Lutfi Mohtar. Ada ini Amir? Okay. All these are my officers, which I am very glad I could lead them. And I would like to express my sincere gratitude and appreciation to all my officers for the assistance rendered for the 8 chapters we contributed, 8 chapters that we have contributed to the book. We tried our level best to prepare the drafts within limited time constraints, in between Yang Berhormat, in between duties in the Dewan Rakyat, in between parliamentary sessions, committee meetings. We had so many committee meetings. We are having it simultaneously, in between PAC meetings, in between preparations of various committee reports. So you just imagine, yours truly and my whole team, we were trying to catch our breath within the time. And Tan Sri said, you must meet this deadline. We tried to make it though. Syukur Alhamdulillah, we made it within deadlines. Thank you, Yang Berhormat Tan Sri Muhammad Arif, for further perusing our 8 chapters regardless of time, be it AM, that is in the morning, which I sometimes send Tan Sri, 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, or being PM in the day. As you know, the background of Tan Sri, being a lecturer, he's like doing that to his students. when I sent it to him, he will scrutinize every line, every comma. And so glad, Tan Sri, we really appreciate your very much, your intellectual guidance to us. Maybe a round of applause to Tan Sri. Thank you. Before Tan Sri perused and checked, I still am worried whether I could meet that standard, that very high standard that has been with his former academic background as a lecturer, etc. Thank you. Boys, we made it, okay? The 8th chapter that Datuk Rosmi and the Office of the Clerk contributed are as follows. I must highlight here so that I can create interest. Chapter 10, the institutions of Parliament. 2, Chapter 12, the role of the Secretary to Parliament, which many people do not know how we run Parliament and how we jump every morning to see Tan Sri and what we do behind the scene. And chapter number 3, Chapter 13, the administration of Parliament. This is within Datuk Kami's jurisdiction. Number 4, Chapter 14, the order of business. And number 5, Chapter 17, statements by ministers. Number 6, Chapter 18, ordinary legislative process, which people take for granted. Number 7, Chapter 19, the legislative process of financial bills. You can see a lot of things you have not seen before. Chapter 21, the special chambers. Let me just highlight a bit, Tan Sri, 5 minit sikit lagi. Please bear with me to create interest. Chapter 10, the institutions of Parliament, among others, encompasses His Majesty Yang di-Pertuan Agong Dewan Rakyat Dewan Negara, membership of Parliament, qualification, disqualification, oath, absence of members, summoning Parliament, prorogation, dissolution, sessions, meetings, sittings, quorums, which all MPs should know the distinction that is in the book. If it is not in the book, MPs pun tak tahu. They do not know the difference between a session, between a meeting, between a sitting. Tan Sri, we highlight so that MPs and all the general masses would understand. Chapter 12, the role of the secretary. Yes, we highlight with pictures and also touches general duties of the secretary. Before session, during session, answers to questions, motion, legislative process. During the first meeting after election, how the secretary have to have the process of the election of the speaker, Tan Sri. I think I did that well. Order of business, election of Tuan Yang di-Pertua, administration of oath, assisting preparation of rulings, during opening of Parliament, conference of speakers of Parliament and state legislative assemblies, international parliamentary level. Ladies and gentlemen, two more. The administration of Parliament, the Secretariat of Parliament, comprises of 11 divisions. So this chapter 13 elaborates the functions. Chapter 14 is the order of business. This chapter order of business, the arrangement of business in Dewan Rakyat, the daily order paper, arrangement of public business. Chapter 17 is on statement by ministers as provided in Standing Order 14(1)I, highlighting examples of revised statements and also the procedures. Chapter 18, the ordinary legislative process. There are illustrations which can clearly shown formulating and tabling a bill, process of amendment to the Constitution, provisions relating to the limitation of constituencies. Chapter 19, the legislative process of financial bills. This chapter highlights money bills, supply bills, sending money bills to Senate, money bills to be certified by Tuan Yang-di-Pertua, assent to bills by the House of Representatives. Lastly, Chapter 21, the Special Chamber. The chapter focuses on matters referred to the Special Chamber, i.e., motions on the matter of administration for which the government is responsible, under Standing Order 17, and motions on a defined matter of urgent public importance, under Standing Order 18. Hopefully that can create interest as to people to buy the book, Tan Sri. Ladies and gentlemen, with that note, I think my time is up, the speaker says. I once again congratulate Yang Berhormat Tan Sri Datuk Muhammad Arif Yusuf, Speaker of Dewan Rakyat, the General Editor cum co-author, all co-authors, Mr. Girish Gamat, Country Head, Thomson Reuters, our publisher, not forgetting Rachel, I just came to know you just now, who has been in communication with us, Editorial Committee, Yang Bahagia Datuk Khamis, Chief Administrator of Parliament, Team YPDR Book Writers, Team from Pengurusan Dewan Rakyat, Team from Research Division, and all others who had contributed as collective effort to the success of producing our very own Malaysian Parliament Pride, Law, Principles and Practice in Dewan Rakyat, House of Representatives, Malaysia 2020. Kudos to all. Thank you. Wabillahi taufiq. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Nanti dah bunyi bell.
Thank you, Datuk. Next, please welcome Honourable Senator Mr. Liu Chin Tong, Editorial Committee member of this book, to deliver his speech.
Tan Sri Muhammad Arif bin Muhammad Yusuf, Deputy Speakers Ngakoming and then Rashid Hanun, friends VK Liu, Professor Farooqi, Professor Farid Sufyan, fellow MPs and everyone else here. A very good afternoon to all of you. May I first thank Tan Sri Muhammad Arif bin Muhammad Yusuf, Speaker of Parliament, for giving me this honour of being appointed to the editorial committee, as well as to be invited to speak at this very special occasion. For your knowledge, I'm a phantom of Dewan Rakyat. I was selected in 2008 as MP for Bukit Bendera, then in 2013 as MP for Kluang. I was not elected to Dewan Rakyat in 2018, so I live in another house, but come to Dewan Rakyat very often. I first got involved in championing parliamentary reforms when I was assisting Lim Kee Siang in organizing a forum on First World Parliament in May 2004, attended by Dato Sri Nasri Aziz, who was made the first ever minister responsible for Parliament. At that time, Kee Siang had just returned to Parliament after a one-term break, and there was a new Prime Minister who campaigned on the reform platform. Dato Sri Nasri was able to promote some international causes via Parliament, such as democratization in Myanmar, for which I'm grateful, but there were very little reform to the actual workings of Parliament. During the tenure of Tan Sri Pandika Amin Mulia, the only substantive change to the parliamentary institution was the establishment of the second chamber, which is important, aimed at creating more parliamentary time for MPs to speak. Regrettably, nothing much beyond that was done in his 10 years as Speaker. It is in such context that the 2 years of the 14th Parliament under the speakership of Tan Sri Muhammad Arif was a great period for parliamentary reform that we will miss and will pray for its returns and continuation. What do we seek to achieve through parliamentary reform? I think the three broad subjects. I seek your indulgence, Tan Sri, I will speak a bit longer, since you won't ring the bell. Parliament is a living institution that should be at the center of rapidly changing national life. Practices of Parliament should reflect the changing need of our societies. Malaysia adopted the Westminster Parliamentary Framework of Government at its independence in 1957, and the first Parliament convened in 1959. It is interesting to note that a permanent set of ministerial select committees scrutinizing the functioning of ministries only came into Westminster in 1979 after Margaret Thatcher's victory. The second chamber, or what we call the Kamar Khas, was first invented in the Australian Parliament and then exported to the Westminster, and we pick it up from there. In the 14th Parliament, for the first time, there was serious efforts to modernize our parliamentary institutions. I recall my many conversations with Tan Sri Muhammad Arif. His eyes shine with excitement when sharing on the practices he learned from overseas visits or seminar conducted by experts like David Elder, or preparing to adopt new ideas. My deputy minister's colleagues and I met Tan Sri Muhammad Arif several times, and each time he listened attentively to our views, and subsequently some practices were changed immediately with the help of Dato' Rosmi and the Parliamentary Service. Why the deputy minister came to see Tan Sri so often? Because we were the main people answering questions in Parliament. So we spent more time in Parliament than ministers. And I felt particularly grateful to Tan Sri because I have lobbied for the same set of changes for years with the previous speaker, but to no avail. One such example was to restrict the time of each question and answer to 6 minutes, to allow for approximately 15 questions to be answered in each of the daily 1.5 hour question time. The 6-minute rule allowed for more questions to be answered and for ministers to know exactly which day of the week their ministries have to answer questions in Parliament. You know, when politicians took the mic, they will speak and speak and speak. So limiting both question and answer time is very important. One of the major pieces of work which is still ongoing is to present a Parliamentary Commission Bill for Parliament to have its own service rather than to be part of the General Civil Service. Much as I and my colleague used to talk about reviving the Parliamentary Service Act 1963, which was abolished in 1992, Tan Sri Muhammad Arif is right with his idea that the Malaysian Parliament deserves a new act to govern its administration so that it actually is up to date, and is part of this idea that we should keep up to date, keep our Parliament up to date. The second reason why we want to push for parliamentary reform is about the idea of core governing. The Westminster Parliament's primary function is actually to form government and to have the confidence in the government to be tested on parliamentary flaws. But Parliament should not be put aside to become a rubber stamp after government is formed. This is what happened throughout the history of the Malaysian Parliament until 2018. It is very difficult to convince the executive to create more parliamentary committees for the MPs to participate in governing, and for the public to come forward to share their views during parliamentary inquiries. Tan Sri Pandika tried in 2016. There was an attempt to set up parliamentary committees, but all the proposals were rejected by the executive at that time. Government needs to see, governments of all stripes, of all parties, needs to see Parliament as partners in core governing to enable the flourishing of parliamentary committees as well as high-quality debates and questions in the chamber. Ministers won't know everything that happened under their watch. The time of government knows best is long gone. Transparency and accountability by ministers to Parliament and by civil servants to parliamentary committees would help ensure that the government is run with the people's best interest in mind. I think that part about civil servant responding or coming forward to explain their ministry to the parliamentary committees is something that we should push and we should do more. Core governing through parliamentary committees would also help nurture a bipartisan group of MPs who will be subject matters expert on policy areas they devote their time on. This would allow successive government from both sides to draw talents to be promoted to the front bench. Their interaction with bureaucrats in the committee works would also help foster a strong whole of government ethos. Committee works would also strengthen collegial bipartisanship, which are important to the functioning of democracy. Our bipartisanship usually happen at the coffee house, at the lounge. We do have bipartisanship, but it's in the lounge. Whereas I think an actual democracy needs more than the lounge to be a place for bipartisanship. I'm very glad that the 14th Parliament has a very active Public Accounts Committee chaired by an opposition MP and 10 select committees on a wide range of subjects such as Defence and Home Affairs Committee, of which I have interaction with, which can serve as the precursor for full-fledged ministerial select committee system. Public Accounts Committee sessions were planned to be live telecast once rules are changed. More needs to be done to expand the mechanism for core governing. In the years to come, I don't foresee a single dominant party winning more than 1/3 of the seats in Parliament. As a political strategist here speaking, I don't think any party will win more than 70 seats. A single party will win more than 70 seats in the foreseeable future. And therefore, all future government will be formed by coalitions of parties with similar strengths, and there will be more changes of government, hopefully. If one takes a long view, core governing is good for the nation and good for all sides of Parliament. The third part, which I think is important, is to expand time and space for MPs. One important role of the MPs is to speak on behalf of the voters they represent specifically and the general interest they champion. It is important that Parliament makes space and time for MPs to carry out this important function to keep Parliament relevant to the life of ordinary people and to ensure that the powers that be at the highest places hear the voices of people through their elected representative. Let's be frank, to a certain extent, each Parliament or Congress's chamber is a theatre everywhere in the world, whether Congress of US or UK. We cannot stop MPs from theatrical performances. For the longest of time, unfortunately, the Malaysian Parliament faces a double whammy. We don't have enough time for MPs to speak, but once the MP has the opportunity, he or she will load everything at one go, especially during the debate of royal address or the budget. Talking about anything from national issues to the longkang in their kawasan. Tan Sri Muhammad Arif and the 14th Parliament are discussing the possibility of introducing opposition time, while changes are on the way to expand the role of special chamber, Kamahas, second chamber, to allow for more forms of motions for debate so that some constituency-specific matters can be dealt with there without having to waste the chamber's time, the main chamber's time. There were also discussions to allow committees to debate ministerial budget during the committee stage instead of the current practice of the committee of the House. Such move would give MPs ample time to scrutinize ministerial budget instead of the current speed train that does not do justice to the billions of ringgits approved within a couple of hours. For the nation's sake, more should be done to expand the time and space for MPs to bring the voice of the people to Parliament. I believe Tan Sri Muhammad Arif and the 14th Parliament have achieved great heights in enacting reforms which we have not seen since the Malaysian Parliament first convened in 1959. Law, principles, and practice in the Dewan Rakyat of Malaysia is the testimony of his effort that sets the gold standard. It is also a statement of aspiration and an unfinished agenda for all Malaysians to pursue together. It will be on the shoulders of Tan Sri Muhammad Arif and the endeavours of between 2018 and 2020 that the future generations will stand on to achieve a world-class parliament. Amid the global democratic decline, decay, and erosion in the past decades or so, the 14th Parliament under the speakerships of Tan Sri Muhammad Arif was a great exception that we should all celebrate. And I hope this golden age is more than just a sudden appearance, but an ongoing process of democratization of our beloved nation. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, Honourable Senator. Now, I would like to invite none other than the General Editor and co-author of Practice Volume, His Excellency Tan Sri Datuk Muhammad Arif bin Mat Yusuf, to deliver his officiating speech. Please welcome.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Good afternoon to all. A good day. Tan Sri Zahra Ibrahim, former Chief Judge, High Court of Malaya. The Deputy Speakers of the Dewan Rakyat, Yang Berhormat Datuk Rashid Hasnun, and Yang Berhormat Tuan Ngah Koming. A special welcome to Mr. David Elder. I believe he's still watching online. A former clerk of the House of Representatives Australia. And to make matters short, because all the names have been mentioned earlier, so I'll just say esteemed authors and contributors, members of Parliament who are here, thank you very much. Distinguished guests and friends. Title and untitled, to make it short. No need to go through Datuk, Tan Sri and all that. Yeah. Thank you for your attendance here today. I'm, of course, very, very pleased to be here in my capacity as the general editor of this fine book. I'm a bit biased, but here it stands before you. It is a fine book. Yeah? Law, Principles and Practice in the Dewan Rakyat, House of Representatives in Malaysia. It is all the more pleasing to see a majority of the authors of the book present today in this room together with the editors and representatives of the publisher, Thomson Reuters, Sweet and Maxwell, who have been doing a tremendous job getting this book to print. It will come out very soon in the bookshops, maybe 3 weeks or so. Yeah, definitely it will be out because we are having the soft launch today. So definitely it will be out. So place your orders promptly. It has been less than 2 years. I myself find it sometimes difficult to believe. It has been less than 2 years from the conception of the idea to produce a Malaysian version of Eskin May to the soft launch today. So I can understand when Datuk Rosmi came up here just now and spoke with intense, interest and passion. Yeah, they have put in a lot of hard work. The boys from the clerk of the office division, clerk of Dewan Rakyat division, they put in so much hard work, and indeed, congratulations. And indeed, I must say this from the outset. The publication of this work is not merely an academic exercise. It is also meant to be an acknowledgement to the expertise and the knowledge found within this precinct. And to those officers of Parliament who have put in such a great deal of effort, I must thank you again. At long last, we have this fine book documenting that knowledge that is found within the walls of this precinct. Of course, previously we had works done by speakers and deputy speakers, works which tended to be more autobiographical or biographical, talking more about the speakers and the deputy speakers, rather than the processes, and the knowledge found within the House, possessed by the officers of Parliament. So this book, to make it short, is a testimony of the officers of Parliament, and not only one single person. Of course, I've had tremendous help and commitment and zeal from the non-parliamentary authors, people like Professor Goodial Singh, Professor Farid, Professor Schatz, Farooqi, too many to mention, and their assistants as well. Against all odds, they managed to put in extra effort. I know, and they are all very busy, but they put in the extra effort to produce the chapters which are within their special areas of expertise. To all of them, I also would like to repeat my profound thanks. I've done it so many times, but again, for today's launch, thank you very much for the commitment and the legacy. I think this is also important. The legacy that you will leave behind to the literature of Parliament and to the knowledge that has to be built up. And we have taken 60 years to produce a book such as this. It is a modest effort. But it took 60 years to produce this. Since the first book was produced in 1969, there used to be a book produced in 1969, slim volume, but still very useful. But since the day Parliament first sat in its present form, we have not managed to produce a comprehensive text. this is the first ever attempt to produce a comprehensive text. If I may say so, it will provide, between the pages, this book will provide many answers, or at least pointers, to the problems that may arise on a daily basis, all right? In Parliament, or even outside Parliament. Yeah. So, as I was saying just now, for nearly 60 years since its establishment, the Parliament of Malaysia has been the legislative heartbeat of this nation, laying the very foundations for nation building that has propelled domestic and international success. It is the reason why a book such as this is imperative to serve as a guide and source of reference to members of Parliament, parliamentarians, government officers, as well as anyone else involved or interested in the processes and functions of this Parliament, specifically the Dewan Rakyat. Because of the shortage of time, constraint of time, we didn't have time to think about Dewan Negara. And maybe later on, we'll have another volume on Dewan Negara. So let's keep ourselves to the Dewan Rakyat for the moment. Now, the duty of parliamentarians as parliamentarians will hold us accountable to ensure that the lessons of history, the events of the present, and the hopes of the future are encapsulated between the pages of this book. And you will find, the reader will find, once they go through the entire book, there's a lot more in the book rather than rules and practices and conventions. If I can put it this way, it will tell a story of how Parliament has progressed. It will tell a story how reforms have been initiated, sometimes failed reforms, sometimes good reforms that have come to fruition. It will tell a story until May, end of May 2020, the progression of this nation in terms of parliamentary democracy and responsible government. It tells a story with a cliffhanger, of course. I can't write as of today, as you will understand. But it is a cliffhanger, in a sense. So there are lots of other developments which cannot be covered in this book. But if you read through the book, particularly the conclusion, you'll find that the reference to so many of the dramatic events that has happened, not from a political standpoint, but from a constitutional standpoint. I think we are more interested in looking at the constitutions, about the systems and whether it can withstand constitutional incidents and crises. Yeah. Well, you please read it. Buy the book. I think you will enjoy reading the book. Yeah? Don't think of it as a book underlying the rules only. No, it is not. It is meant to be intensely readable to the ordinary reader even. Yeah? To the serious reader, of course, it will be more useful. Prof. Yasuria is here. I told him the other day. We have also included chapters on APPGs. Anything that concerns Parliament, we've got it in the book. Our interaction with the public, with the media, everything is in the book. Nevertheless, it is a modest attempt. Perhaps the second edition, when it comes out, will be double the size. I think it will be, because there are so many other things which I think we need to include. But this is our modest attempt as partly a legacy. Before I forget, this is legacy work. This is a commitment by all the authors who I'm so thankful, I'm nearly choking, but so thankful. You know what? None of them has asked for royalties to be paid. None. All right, let me state it as a matter of record. All the royalties payable, if you sell the book, that is, so please buy, will be given to the club Sukan dan Kaki Tangan Parliament. All right? All of us are doing it not for money. We are not monetizing our effort. This is a legacy. We want to leave this as a legacy. To Parliament, to future parliamentarians, future ministers, future deputy ministers, whoever, who would care to become leaders of this country. Read the book first before you come to Parliament, I think. If you're already in Parliament, read the book to refresh your knowledge on Parliament. All right? So this is what the book stands for, a legacy. All right. Of course, let me just say again, I'm compelled to express the deepest gratitude to the tireless and dedicated contributors, authors and co-authors who shared this literary vision and undertook to lend their expertise in the 28 chapters of this book that sets out to meticulously detail numerous areas of parliamentary practice. Our intentions were to produce a work comparable to the quality of the United Kingdom's Erskine May, with the added touch of bliss and flair. That was what we wanted. Just the idea just sprang to mind. Towards me one day, he said, we need something like the Erskine May, just like that. And we work on that basis. But the book you see today, I think is a little bit more readable than Erskine May. It's a very readable book. I would say it is a cross between Erskine May, Australian parliamentary practice, and that wonderful book produced in UK called Parliament at Work. Yeah? So it's readable, it's informative, it's got commentaries on so many things, it's got anecdotal evidence, it's got formal documents that you can read, it's got charts, it's got diagrams for people to understand in a readable way. Well, it will make the difficult things simple, I think. Yeah? So people will know what is a committee of the whole house, and what is a motion, what are the stages through which a motion will have to go through, that sort of thing. Yeah? From the nitty-gritty to the more general aspects of what is constitutional democracy. Yeah? What role does Parliament have in relation to international treaties? Everything is covered there. In fact, Professor Farid Sufyan mentioned international treaties. I think this is a pioneering book in that sense. Very few books have been written on the role of treaties and parliamentary oversight. All right? I don't think you'll find a chapter in Erskine May on this. All right? But I could be mistaken, but I think this is one of the few books produced that explores the idea of the limits of parliamentary control over executive jurisdiction in treaty making and treaty negotiation. So it's going to be useful, right? Very, very useful. And it has a chapter, a special chapter on caretaker government. Again, you don't find this in many of the textbooks. Right? So buy a copy, read through caretaker government. Right? We have also discussed not only caretaker government, the notion of interim prime minister, all the current areas of concern is looked into, discussed. Yeah, so it's a good book. I like the book. If I like the book, all the rest here would like the book too. So pardon me for trying to promote the book, but quite frankly, I think it is a book that has been worthwhile the effort to produce over the 2 years. So in a way, this book has been long overdue. The commitment to produce the book within the short space of less than 2 years was a very heavy one for all of us. But we wanted not only to get it out or to get it done, but to get it done right. So that's why I think we look at it now with a great deal of satisfaction that finally the work is done. Yeah. Now, so the book, I must say, is a logical continuation of an earlier collaboration between the Malaysian Parliament and the National Democratic Institute, the NDI. You remember a few months ago, there was a soft launch of the Practical Manual on Malaysian Parliamentary Procedure, a guide to standing orders of the Dewan Rakyat. That was published in March. The Bahasa Malaysia edition then came out as well. That was specifically to cater for members of Parliament to help them navigate the intricacies of the standing orders. Right? You will find this particular guide included in the book as well. It will complement the book itself. This is like the big brother to the smaller guide to parliamentary procedure. Ladies and gentlemen, public interest in the Malaysian Parliament has grown dramatically in the last few years, particularly in the last 2 years. We have the figures to show for it. number of hits on social media, number of visitors coming to Parliament. Yeah, someone was telling me just a few days ago, I think number of hits on social media have exceeded 1 million. I think that shows the amount of interest generated in Parliament. However, the public's perception towards Parliament remains mixed, and we have to face it. It is hoped that this book will be part of the ongoing process to inform the public on the constitutional position of our Parliament and why it is so important to maintain and uphold the principles of parliamentary democracy and responsible government. A version of this book in Bahasa Malaysia is in progress, translation is in progress, and hopefully it will be ready for publication within this year and will ensure greater accessibility to all sectors of Malaysian society. And I hope it will also encourage a greater use of the materials here found within the covers of this book among students in Malaysian universities and institutions of higher learning. I've spoken earlier to Prof. Farooqi and Prof. Schatz on the need for universities to also be part of this ongoing process. I hope the universities will pick up this book and introduce courses on parliamentary affairs and so on. Yeah? You have a really array of lecturers to deliver the course. And they're all here today. So you can have a module and can use the book as a reference point. Yeah? So, all right. So ultimately, this work carries with it a hope towards a grander vision to change ideas and discussion on the Parliament of Malaysia, to turn casual conversations about the DEWAN into educated discussions, to ignite passing interest about the legislative process into an unwavering passion to have the nation led to a better future, so that people can understand what they are in here for, and then act accordingly. Because really, a Malaysian population that has greater interest in the DEWAN RAKYAT will pave the way to a greater nation-building effort towards a Malaysia of hope and excellence. In the last 60 years of Parliament, it has been one of learning lessons and establishing a foothold in democracy. I think let us hope the next 60 years be one filled with glorious application of the Merdeka spirit and democratic excellence that will ensure the Parliament of Malaysia becomes a beacon of exemplary representation of its rakyat. It is our hope that this book will find some little place in the process. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think I've taken a bit more time than I had hoped for. Allow me to end this speech by quoting from the first and last paragraphs in the concluding chapter of this book. After all, this is a book launch, so let us end on that basis, and also because I wrote the concluding chapter. So all right. First paragraph, this is how it begins. Constitutional law and practice is at times better understood as regulated politics. There will be occasions when major political incidents or crises will require solutions rooted in constitutional rules and the rule of law, particularly in countries with practicing democracies. Strong institutions and a strong culture of acceptance of the rule of law and a belief in the norms of democracy will ensure the system of government will remain resilient and prevent an erosion of democracy. And the last paragraph, permit me to read it. As indicated in the introduction to this book, its chapters are intended to provide information and pointers to possible solutions to problems and issues, practical or otherwise, involving constitutional and parliamentary affairs. It seeks to provide precedents and anecdotal references to help clarify these problems and issues. With a better appreciation and understanding of the place of our Parliament as a premier institution within the Constitution, perhaps the public governance of this nation will achieve greater resilience and respect. Some of the events highlighted in this book may provide disturbing instances to the contrary. But nevertheless, this book will find a place as a document that highlights standards and benchmarks that a parliament adhering to principles of parliamentary democracy and responsible government should uphold. So I end on that basis. No matter the politics, this is a book that sets out the benchmarks of good practices. This is a book which will inform the reader how to achieve this international benchmark, and what we have done so far to achieve that international benchmark. I think we have to be thinking about having a parliament that is world class and not merely the regional class. I think we should aim for that, and all the principles, as they say, are within the covers of this book. All right. So, with that, ladies and gentlemen, let me end it in bahasa Malaysia dengan lafaz Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dengan sukacitanya saya bagi pihak penulis dan penyunting buku merasmikan pelancaran buku ini. So, terima kasih. Thank you very much for being here. Yeah.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Now, let's watch a video montage of the book. As a token of appreciation, we would like to thank Thomson Reuters for being instrumental in publishing this book. As the publisher of this practice volume, Thomson Reuters would like to donate some books to the Parliament Library. Hence, I would like to invite Mr. Girish Kamath to hand some books to the speaker as a symbol of donation. Please welcome. Thank you, Mr. Girish Kamath. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed with the commentary session. Please welcome our first commentator, Ms. Lina Henry, Program Advisor of National Democratic Institute.
Hi, good afternoon. Tan Sri Datuk Muhammad Arif bin Muhammad Yusuf, Deputy Speakers, YB Datuk Rashid bin Asnon, YB Tuan Nga Koming, Tan Sri Zahra Ibrahim, former Chief Judge, High Court of Malaya, authors and contributors, honorary members of Parliament, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me give a commentary today. It's really been a great honor to actually speak on the book, and apologies for not being able to be present there physically in person. First of all, I would like to congratulate the speaker on the launch of this book, Law, Principles and Practice in the Dewan Rakyat, House of Representatives of Malaysia. As we all can agree, in the past 2 years, there has been consistent efforts by him to make the parliament more engaged and open to public by the speaker. Being an important institution in the governance of the country, the parliament was very distant and not very engaging to the everyday citizen. And the legalistic approach has also prevented people from trying to understand the parliamentary rules and procedures in a more depth and use it for their benefit, especially with civil society organizations, which is one of the important stakeholders. And even for someone who works with the parliament on a daily basis, sometimes find certain information alien. National Democratic Institute started working with the speaker back in 2019 to simplify the current standing orders and published the guide titled Malaysian Parliamentary Procedures, a guide to the standing orders of the Dewan Rakyat. The speaker mentioned it earlier, which is also part of the appendix of the current book that is being launched. We were very lucky to have two authors, Maja Balakrishnan, who has also contributed to a chapter in this book, who co-authored the guidebook together with Monique Smith from Canada. The guidebook actually provides a thematic summary of the main standing orders and is intended to assist members of the House in the proper application of rules and procedures as they fulfill their legislative and oversight duties. The English, as the speaker said, English version was launched in March and the Malay version was launched in May 2020. The book, which is the big brother that is being launched now with the guide, will provide a good overview of the Parliament of Malaysia, from the structure, the process to the rules and procedures. It also goes deeper into each aspect, which will be useful to academicians, researchers, students, civil society members, and others who have a professional interest in the Parliament. The systematically numbered paragraphs represents usability and easy access to those who are not familiar with the language used in the Parliament. Each chapter in this book gives insight to readers on procedures, processes, conventions, and practices that have evolved over the past 61 years. It is the culminations of work that have been gathered to provide more clarity and transparency. This is not the first of such book, but definitely a more comprehensive version to take into account the current systems and to something which is very close to the Erskine-May book. This will also increase the visibility of the Parliament, and while it is a modest step, we have seen in the past few months to show that how important it is to work constantly and intentionally to clarify and strengthen the Parliament. With Parliament being the pillar of democracy for any country, it is important that this kind of information is available to be used by different sectors of the society. The past 2 years have been a lot of unprecedented firsts in Malaysia that have tested commitments to democratic norms and principles and even the law itself. So as in every democracy, there will be further tests and challenges to meet. However, the mark of success for democracy is the triumph of norms, process, institutions that fairly and transparently represent and respond to the will of the people, which the speaker has strived to accomplish in his tenure of the past 2 years, and I hope he can continue his good work and his effort and make Malaysian Parliament a world-class institution. Once again, congratulations Tan Sri Arif and all the co-authors who have contributed to this book. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lina Hendry. Now, please welcome Honorable Datuk V.K. Liew, Member of Parliament for Batu Sapi, former Law Minister, to give his comment on the book.
Thank you. Yang Berhormat Tan Sri Speaker, distinguished guests, you want me to comment on the books which I have not read, but having listened to all the comments from all these distinguished guests today, I must say that it is a book that I think I cannot wait to read tonight if I'm given a copy. But otherwise, I will have to wait until the publishers publish it, probably in about a couple of weeks from now. I have been Member of Parliament since 2008, and I took a break in 2013 and came back in 2018. And there has been a tremendous journey to see where Parliament has gone from before. And I must say that most of these works that have been written today must have been the works of all these hardworking workers from Parliament, from the clerks of the House, from Dr. Rosmi, whom I have known for almost 10 years now. And I think most of us just cannot wait to read the books. I must congratulate once again Tan Sri, Speaker, and all the distinguished writers for these tremendous works. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yang Berhormat. Next, I would like to invite Ms. Masjaliza Hamzah, Program Advisor of Malaysia Reform Initiatives, to give her comment on this book. Please welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam MC. Mr. Speaker, distinguished guests, distinguished panel of contributors to the book. Firstly, like everyone else, I'd like to congratulate everyone. I'd like to particularly congratulate the speaker for helming this project and for making sure that that this project comes to a fruition. We were given a typeset of the book, so I've gone through a few of the chapters. I've gone through the introduction, chapter 13, chapter 27, as well as the conclusion. There are many important features in it which actually shows the actual functions. For example, chapter 13, I've always been, in our interactions with Parliament here, I've always wondered what the different departments do, and I found some of the answers to the questions in this book. I'd also like to underscore what, in a way, the speaker said. The conclusion, it is not just good reading, it's also quite riveting given the political changes that have happened that have had an impact on Parliament. In terms of just some other comments, I think I speak as someone who used to be a journalist who covered Parliament in 1994. It's a long time ago. I also speak as a former activist who used to find it not easy to access Parliament, especially when you want to hand over petitions, etc., and all that. When different laws were made and being bulldozed and things like that. So I also am speaking as someone who currently, and because of my employment, also engages with Parliament on various parliamentary reform matters. So in that respect, I think there are two key things that I feel are very important. The book is really wonderful. The book captures, in a way, what the current practices are. It also captures what the aspirations could be. Two things I think that could be very useful in terms of moving forward. One is connecting with young people. I think a lot of young people, and especially people who are 18, maybe people who are 18 who can vote in the next election, these people will need to be interested in what happens in Parliament. It cannot be that, I think a long time ago, Parliament feels like a private members club for the MPs. It feels like the members of the public has a long way to go in terms of accessing Parliament and giving voice to the people. That feeds the declining trust and participation and interest of the public in what happens in Parliament. And when that happens, I think it doesn't serve anyone's purpose. If voters find it difficult to understand what elected representatives do for them and what they're doing. How does Parliament look at its citizens who wish to do more and who wish to be more involved in its proceedings. I think there needs to be education for young people, citizenship curriculum. I think the Honourable Speaker mentioned that. Citizenship curriculum, outreach work with schools and colleges, and engagement with new voters to make sure that they are interested in what's happening. Another key thing is engagement with the media. I think that will help a lot in terms of improving public interest in what happens in Parliament, more than just reporting on what MPs say and the back and forth that happens in Parliament, more substantive, and it enables media to actually report on reforms that are happening in Parliament. I think if you look in media, if you read the media, there's not much of that being captured. There's a lot of what this MP say, what that MP said, and fighting or infighting between them and all that. So that would be something that would be good. How the Parliament interacts with the media is important because it influences the way in which media covers Parliament. With that, I'd like to congratulate everyone who's involved in this book. It's a long time coming, 60 plus years, as people who follow affairs that happen in Parliament. I think this is a good reference book for us, a good way with which we can see, understand it a little bit more, so it's not a myth, it's not something that we don't understand, but something we can keep up with, and to make sure that the Parliament addresses the people's concerns and and be there to represent the voice of the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Masjaliza. The next commentator for today is Ms. Maja Balakrishnan, the co-author of Malaysian Parliamentary Procedure, a guide to the standing orders of the Dewan Rakyat. Please welcome.
Thank you, Tan Sri, distinguished guests. I'd like to start by congratulating Tan Sri on the soft launch of this book, and also to thank the speaker as well as the editorial team for giving me the opportunity to contribute to the book. This was a book that was waiting to be written. All modern and advanced parliaments have similar textbooks that serve as a resource for MPs, for practitioners, and for members of the public. For our Dewan Rakyat, this moment, with this speaker who has spearheaded unprecedented reforms and encouraged parliamentary independence, with this team of expert writers and editors, and against this background of growing parliamentary consciousness, now was the right time to publish this book. I wanted to share some thoughts about why I think this book is particularly significant to the political literature for Malaysia. Most of us have heard the phrase that knowledge is power. But knowledge is only power if it arrives to the reader in its cleanest, unmanipulated form. For a long time, knowledge about the workings of Malaysia's political institutions, I think particularly Parliament, was not widely available or simply not codified, not written down. A book such as this breaks that monopoly over parliamentary knowledge, and it removes the filter of the narrator's bias. Tools of knowledge should always strive to be neutral. This book, certainly the contents that I've seen, offers knowledge, information, and insight that is politically neutral. But while doing so, it still advances the fundamental principles about the role of the Dewan Rakyat. And what are those? We all know them. That the Dewan Rakyat functions as a deliberative assembly of the Rakyat's representatives and everything that that entails. That the Dewan Rakyat is supposed to effectualize the separation of powers. That the Dewan Rakyat is supposed to ensure that the rule of law is upheld, and equally important, that the basic structure of the federal constitution is preserved. But the topics in this book do not simply talk about these higher principles or normative values. They actually offer concrete, tangible, procedural information and practical insight about the rules and procedures of the DEWAN RAKYAT. I have sought to do the same in the chapter that I wrote, which covers the principles and procedures for parliamentary questions and plenary debates. I think the best way to describe the significance of parliamentary questions and debates is to use the common metaphor about democracy. So democracy has been described as a marketplace for the contestation of ideas. If that's the case, then the chamber of the DEWAN RAKYAT is the market square, where these ideas are peddled and bartered and negotiated. And in that square, parliamentary questions, legislative debates, these are some of the vital tools of trade that these political merchants use. In the introductory sections of my chapter, I discuss this, that debates and questions do not simply fulfill the legislative and oversight functions of Parliament. They are also critical tools that serve a political function, both for the government and the opposition, and for factions within the government and the opposition. And it is important to keep all of these perspectives in mind when we study the rules of procedure for debates and parliamentary questions, because it will help us to understand how these parliamentary tools can serve a multitude of purposes and also to meet the interests of different stakeholders within the political process. In addition to this, in addition to being able to set out the rules of procedure based on the standing orders, I was very fortunate to be able to include in my chapter a description of some of the internal processes that are not captured in the standing orders, but form part of the practice and conventions of the House. On this point, I must thank Amir Shahrizan and Shahrazad from the DEWAN RAKYAT Management Division for taking the time to share their knowledge and information with me. I also must thank the speakers team behind this book for providing me with the resources I needed on short notice. And this includes Mutana, Hadi, Christy, Fatiha, Ali, and all the others who I have not named, but who I know have worked tirelessly to make sure that this project was a success. I too would like to end this commentary the same way I ended my chapter, which is to quote a very well-known American parliamentary expert by the name of Lester Cushing. This is from his manual on parliamentary procedure, published in 1845. The great purpose of all rules and forms is to subserve the will of the assembly rather than to restrain it, to facilitate and not to obstruct the expression of their deliberative sense. If I may paraphrase, the market square must remain neutral for the marketplace of ideas to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maha. Now we open the floor for commentary session. You may use the standing mic provided. Thank you to all the commentators for their insightful comments on this book. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our event for today. Before we officially end this event, I would like to call upon all authors and contributors of the book to join our speakers for a group photo. Please welcome.